Good morning, good morning, good morning. That's right. I come from a call and response organizing tradition, so let's try this again. Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. It appears that many people had a very good night because this room is a little sparse. So I'm going to encourage you now, for all of your friends that you are out with till 1 or 2 a.m., to get those text messages, to get butts and seats, because we're about ready to start a phenomenal panel reflecting on this moment and talking about the future ahead. Again, my name is Jesse Ulibarri, co-executive director of SIX, and this is Neha Patel, the other co-executive director of SIX, who has starting to lose her voice. So I'm going to be speaking on behalf of both of us. You may have heard her in the lobby giving love to our staff, to our board, to each of you, and so we're going to hold that voice so she can be on the main stage later today. We are settling in today. Yesterday we started with a great welcome to Georgia, reflecting on the lessons from the South and how to think about organizing and being big in this moment, rooting in joy and grief, connection, care, and being clear about the work that is for each of us to hold in this moment. And we're going to do some collective sense-making. We're going to be in this room with some brilliant minds having conversations about how do we think about charting a path forward together. And so in just 1 minute, I will be introducing an all-star panel of folks who come from issue organizing, base building, state-elected life, and we'll be talking about how we think of the moments ahead. So before we get there, though, we just want to share some important and exciting news. After almost a year-long search, we are very proud to share that SIX has hired a new Senior Vice President of Programs. Woo! And we are elated to say that Georgia State Senator Kim Jackson will be our new Senior Vice President of Programs. And here she is. So we get to love on Kim just for a quick minute. She serves and lives in Stone Mountain and goes just down the street here to the state capitol every single day to represent her community. But we've come to know Kim in her work as a senator, as a pastor, as someone who is a tireless advocate for the unhoused, and someone who has continued to shape and grow our own programming here at SIX. As a farmer, she's been active in our cohort for rural opportunity and prosperity, also known as CROP, engaging in rural communities, sustainable practices, land repatriation for Black folks in the South. It's an amazing, amazing set of accomplishments, and she's been a leader on things like reproductive rights, health, and justice, caring for first-line responders in communities who need care, and she brings all of that with her into her role in public life. But we just want to say that it's been a deep honor just to get to know Kim as Kim. Not the Reverend Kim, not as Senator Kim, but as a phenomenal person and leader in this moment. We asked Kim to join us at a series that we convened over 2 years called Outside Voices, where we put movement leaders and legislators together to help chart a course for us collectively, which is why she's anchoring this panel today. And every time she showed up with the clarity of what we need to do and the way that the systems don't work for us, and yet many systems don't work for many of us. And so how do we actually stand up in our full humanity and the brilliance of our own bodies and say, we can do this? And I get to see that with Kim every single day in her leadership and elected life, but I also get to see that in the way she holds and cares for her wife and her kids. And Neha and I often compete for grandparent duty of holding the kids. So it is wonderful to have her in this role as a homecoming. Because for us, it is having Kim back at home in this role at SIX. And so we're so grateful for your leadership and for your partnership at this moment. So without further ado, it is my great honor to introduce the other panelists who will be here. Kim will be stewarding the conversation. But we have Chris Melody Fields Figueredo, who is the Executive Director of the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center. Maurice Mitchell, who is the National Director of the Working Families Party and Working Families Power. Iowa Representative J.D. Schulten, and Arizona Representative Stephanie Stahl-Hamilton. Please help us in welcoming them to the stage.
Well, good morning. Oh, come on, there are more of us. We can do better than that. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Oh, it's my great joy and honor to welcome you all to Six for this morning and this day as we continue to learn how to engage in collaborative government with one another and how to continue to build an irresistible future for ourselves and for those who will come after us. And it is also my great honor and privilege to welcome you to Georgia. And welcome especially to the ATL. We hope that you have had a great experience so far and that you'll get an opportunity to experience more of what Atlanta and the great state of Georgia has to offer before you find your way back home. I want to take a moment to introduce our panelists with a little more depth than just their names before we get started in a deeper conversation. First, to my immediate left, I have Chris Melody Fields-Figueredo. And Chris is the executive director for BISC, which has, it means something.
There are words. Everybody just calls us BISC, Ballot Initiative Strategy Center.
Thank you, because my notes don't even say what it means.
Literally nobody calls us that.
Yes.
Not even our conference.
So Chris has over 2 decades of experience in working in advocacy and creating collaborative spaces and movement building. She's a devoted career in social justice work and has really worked to ensure that our democracy works for we, the people. Chris is the first queer woman of color to lead BISC, where she focuses on organizational vision, strategic planning, and fundraising. She believes ballot measures can be a tool for liberation if we use them to build power, dismantle systems of oppression, and center communities most impacted by the changes we seek. Chris is Venezuelan American, raised in Texas, and she lives in Washington, D.C. with her feisty, powerful, and strong daughter, Olivia, and a border collie. Tell Olivia we shouted her out today, please.
Oh, yes.
Next to Chris, we have Maurice Mitchell, who, as many of you know, is the National Director for the Working Families Power. Yes. He is a nationally recognized social movement organizer and strategist, a visionary leader, and very much involved in the movement for Black lives. As a community organizer, as a man who is engaged in racial and social and economic justice, Mo has been well respected across his field and across the nation. He was born in New York to Caribbean working class parents, and he began organizing as a teenager, and even though he still looks like a teenager, he's never stopped.
Black don't crack.
Don't crack. At Howard University, after a classmate at Howard, yes, after a classmate was killed by police officers, Mo led organizing efforts against police brutality and for the divestment from private prisons. He's worked as an organizer for the Long Island Progressive Coalition, downstate organizing director for the Citizen Action in New York, and has been the director of the New York State Civic Engagement Table. Let's welcome Mo to the stage. We also have with us Representative J.D. Stolten, who received a shout out just yesterday from the main stage for his courageous and exciting win in Iowa, where he is now the only Democrat. Oh, no, it's 2? Well, my notes are wrong.
Half.
Okay, in the half.
In the whole entire western half, there's only 2 of us in the
2.
entire state. And in northwest Iowa, in 32 counties, it's this.
So JD, in addition to serving as the representative for Iowa, before that, he played baseball. Do you want to correct this too?
I might have sent that a little while ago. No, I ended up playing professional baseball this summer, so I'm technically a current professional baseball player. I'm the only professional baseball player and elected official at the same time.
I love these bio edits.
That's awesome. And we did not have that in our list of firsts or onlys. So we will celebrate that now. JD is the first and only professional baseball player who laments that he's not left-handed like me because he would have started playing pro a lot earlier if he had been. So in addition to playing baseball, JD really captured, I think, the hearts of so many in this nation when he ran for Congress back in 2020 and showed the world what a progressive platform can mean for rural folks, and that his message could speak to and capture the hearts of people who live in rural areas in Iowa. And so JD ran in 2018, and then he ran again in 2020. And he took a campaign RV, can't get much more country than that. He took a campaign RV to all 374 towns in his district and was one of the few non-incumbent Democratic candidates to outperform the top of the ticket. Let's take a moment and welcome JD. And then last but certainly not least, we have the Reverend Representative Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. Stephanie is an Arizona who has spent her early childhood years on the Navajo tribal lands. She's married to Derek Hamilton, who is a middle school teacher in Tucson, and 23 years of marriage has blessed them with 3 beautiful and feisty children. After completing her Master's of Divinity degree at Princeton Theological Seminary, Stephanie and Derek made Tucson their home. She's an ordained Presbyterian minister and currently serves as the priest associate or parish associate at St. Mark's Presbyterian Church. Stephanie's faith and love for her community drove her extensive involvement from coaching cross country to coordinating the after-school garden program to working in schools as a substitute teacher, and even serving on the site council and the PTO. Stephanie was elected to the State House of Representatives in 2020. She's also served in the state Senate, and Stephanie is an active and important part of 6 Reproductive Freedom Leadership Council. Yes. The nation's only network of state legislators champion reproductive health, freedom, and rights. Let's welcome Stephanie as well. So we already started on this moment, thanks to JD's on-the-spot edits to his bio, with a few celebrations. But I want us to continue as we think about kind of the charting our next steps in light of the election. I do want us to start from a place of celebration. We named some of those things from the main stage, some of the many wins that we did have, particularly in our state elected offices. And we are so overjoyed that you all are sitting here in this room, many of you, because you were elected. You were re-elected for some of you, and for even others, you were elected for the first time. And so we celebrate that in the face of also acknowledging a disappointing outcome on the federal level. I want to just also take a moment to give the panelists an opportunity to just talk about the things that they want to celebrate before we dive deeper into this work of how we might respond. And so, as you kind of reflect on the last, I guess we've had about 6 weeks or so post-election, what are things that you want to lift up, that you want to celebrate as we move forward? Chris, when do you want to start with that?
Good morning. There's more of you in. You're getting a little warmed up. I said my opening joke is I got here at 3 o'clock in the morning because of flight delays. You didn't order her extra crispy, but she's going to be delicious. I want to celebrate organizing. It is just so critically important to celebrate that. Even in trying times, there was really good organizing that happened this election, especially on the state and local level. And we see that through ballot measures where we delivered a lot of wins to celebrate for our people. And we need to celebrate voters. because really through ballot measures, they're very clear about the issues that they care about, and we gave them power and agency to do that. So organizing and some of the voters, for sure.
Mo, what are you celebrating?
What am I celebrating? Good morning, everyone. Well, I always like to celebrate the present moment, right? Because it's important for us to be reminded, especially after a loss, that the inertia of the past doesn't predetermine what happens in the present, right? And the winning is so much better than losing, like 1,000 times better. But during losses, one of the benefits of a loss, and I want to celebrate this because I'm celebrating this in advance, is it gives us an opportunity to make real assessments of the power that we have and the power that we need. It allows us to, in a very humble way, recognize that we need one another and that we need coalition and that we're stronger together. And losses are often breeding grounds for innovation and new strategies. So I'm celebrating in advance the new coalitions that will be built, the new strategies that will be developed, the innovations that will emerge from this moment, and the victories that we'll seize.
I'm celebrating the fact that economic populism is starting to get attention in this country. When I ran in 2018 initially, I had a used Winnebago RV, threw my logo on the side and went nonstop. And I heard similar things over and over again from Democrats, Independent, Republican, anybody who I was willing to chat with or was willing to chat with me. And there's just this narrative out there of people are struggling. Like where I'm from hasn't bounced back since the 2008 economic crisis. I live in an immigrant meatpacking town, and it's been that way since the 1880s. And we've been left behind for a long time, and people feel that. And I'm glad that more and more conversations about what it means to be an economic populace and an inclusive economic populace. And so I will dive into that more, but that's what I'm here today to celebrate.
It's good, this question, celebration. Arizona took some hits this year, except for, right, we were able to pass a valid initiative that enshrines the right to abortion in our state constitution. We had a few whiplash moments, and that, for a hot minute there, we thought we were going to have a near total ban where we criminalized doctors. And the Supreme Court handed Arizona a win, and when they made that ruling, it mobilized and motivated people to get out and to make sure we had enough signatures to get the initiative on the ballot. And Arizonans overwhelmingly, almost two to one, said we want the right to abortion. So it's a huge win for the people of Arizona. Now, on the flip side, we also passed a very cruel immigration ballot measure, which falls in line with what we're seeing at the national level. But out of that passage, I think I was so surprised at my own district, we already are mobilizing and organizing, and folks are coming together to figure out how we are going to take care of our people. And I am amazed at and grateful for the bright minds and the passion already, boots on the ground, ready to go, so that we make sure we are doing everything we can to make sure our families stay together, and that we can stem the tide of deportations in our state.
Thank you. Mo said that winning is 1,000 times better than losing, and it is, but it also brings a certain amount of clarity. And for the last 5 years, I've worked with people who are experiencing homelessness and who've kind of had everything stripped away. And as a result of that, they've gotten, oftentimes they talk about the clarity that they have about what's truly important and about who they want to be moving forward and how they want to move forward as a result of that loss, of significant loss of home, of loss of shelter. And so I want to offer that to this panel to really reflect on, as we sit in this place of loss, what's clear to you today? What's been stripped away that you see about who do we need to be? Who are we? Maybe we should start there. What has this loss taught us about who we are? But also, who do we need to be as we move forward? What really matters as we move forward? What does this loss open up for us to be able to reflect on? So I'll start with JD. Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different ways we can take this question, and one of the ways I want to talk about it is how we organized, because I'm coming from a state legislative background, and so how do we talk to our voters? Because it's clear our message isn't going to a lot of people that we need to be voting for us, and who would be voting for us if we can get it out. I have huge issues with Van. I think a lot of folks can feel that, especially I just came back from a trip to London where I found out the private equity British firm owns Van. And so, like, I don't know if you noticed, but private equity hasn't really done great for our country in a lot of different ways. Look at the nursing home crisis, look at a lot of different ways. We don't have to dive into all that. But I think we are living in a post-Citizens United political era, and we have to redefine how we organize and how we talk to voters. And that, to me, is so clear after this election. It doesn't matter how much money you have in a campaign. If you're not getting your message out to voters, at the end of the day, that's it. And so that, to me, is the clarity I see right now.
What about you, Stephanie?
Yeah, I alluded to some of what became more clear and how we have to be in Arizona. I am grateful. We've got groups that are already starting to do a Know Your Rights training. Back in 2010, Arizona passed a horrible bill known as SB 1070 that put local government in charge of, we called it the Show Me Your Papers bill. Like, anybody could be stopped and asked to produce documentation that said they were, were allowed to be in the country. And that created so much fear and havoc, but it also created such it took a hit to our economy in Arizona. And I suspect throughout the rest of the United States that migrant labor, migrant workers support our hospitality industry, agriculture, and the construction trades. And I think the wave of what's coming our way is we have to be concerned about that. We've got to be concerned about what that's going to do for everybody's livelihood and how things function. And so I think for us, it has forced a coming together. Like I said, we already have groups that are organizing, tag teaming. It feels like in Arizona, we are more ready for this moment. And I will tell you, it took us years, but we have just a few pieces left of that SB 1070, but the people who were in office that put those things in place are no longer in office. They're gone, and our communities are still here. And we are ready for this moment.
That's great. Mo, what about you? What's become more clear to you?
Well, I want to respond with some humility, right? Because I think there's like a market demand minutes after an election is called to be the hottest and quickest and smartest person to usually a man, to screenshot a note that you wrote to yourself a week ago and post it on Twitter. And it's like magically every single one of your prior ideas were actually the ideas that would have won the election, and everybody else made all the mistakes that led to our downfall, right? And so I want to caution all of us not to do that. I think this is a time for introspection, and there's some things that aren't clear because, like, we don't have the voter file. Van, right? and we won't have the voter file for a little while. We'll learn some more things, but I also don't want us to fall into the survivorship fallacy. So, like, after a win, everybody who was involved in that win, they're all geniuses, and everything we did that led to that win was perfect, and after a loss, we're all losers. And that robs us of some analytical clarity, right? We shouldn't pretend that we didn't do some things right if we didn't have some, like I'm looking at most, if not everybody here won their election, right? And at Working Families Party, state after state after state after state, we had real hard-won victories, and not just in like super blue places, but in purple districts and in Democratic strongholds and many, many places, and not just, you know, decadent liberal elite like coastal places, but, you know, so I'm really proud of all of that. The fact that like in Connecticut, like a half a dozen purple seat Republicans were defeated by labor-backed WP people on the House level. Or in the city of Portland, we have a WP majority, and like in the state of Arizona, our people are building and caucusing, and we're doing that caucusing work in Rhode Island, and like we are building something that is more resilient than ever, and also this crazy idea that we need independent politics, that we need a labor party in this country. It doesn't sound so crazy right now. So that to me is becoming more and more clear, and I think we shouldn't rob ourselves of the things that we know, because the intelligence from the ground, like this whole conversation around populism, right? I'm so happy that our friends are joining us from the establishment of the Democratic Party to actually talk seriously about the issues of working class people. But let's not let them rob us of the nuanced conversation around that and use that conversation as a cudgel against the left and progressives.
Yeah, I mean, I so agree with Mo that this is a moment to listen and learn and not get in the hot takes that we have seen over the last 6 weeks. You know, what's really clear for me is part of the way through is it's just so clear is states and local. And it's in the states that are the hardest. It's the Ohios, it's the Floridas, it's the Missouris, it's the Kentuckys, it's the Georgias, it's the Iowas, it's the Arizonas. And it isn't always the states to a 270 map. And we cannot divest in those hard states because that's actually abandonment. And there are people and communities in those states that deserve to live with dignity and thrive. So that's absolutely clear to me. It's also really clear to me that we have to to what you were talking about, JD, we have to do a better job of connecting the dots for people. So much of this election was about the threat to democracy, but for most people, you cannot eat democracy. That's not putting food on my table. That's not getting me an abortion. That's not giving me paid leave. That's not funding our public schools, right? We have to do a better job of connecting the dots and having real conversations with people, hard conversations with people. I joke that, you know, I'm going to applaud some voters, but actually, no, everybody. Voters should be applauded, and especially in the states where we won on the ballot with ballot measures on the issues that are our issues. We need to approach them with curiosity and not shame. That's not how we build them into our coalition. That's not how we bring them into a working class party, right? We have to approach it with curiosity and engagement. And I just believe so strongly that we can't shame people in this moment.
I just want to add off of this, the clarity and listening. It's very clear that our healthcare system is not working. In the last week, very clear.
One of the responses that we saw published in a major newspaper asked the question of whether or not our policies and our those of us on the left, if our tent had gotten too big, and if we'd welcome too many people to be able to be successful. And this isn't on y'all's script, so you're gonna have to, you know. And so I want us to talk a bit about what does success actually look like? Is success 270 in the Electoral College? And what does it mean for us to build a collaborative process that has a really big coalition? Is that the future? Is that the irresistible future that we hope for multiple generations? Because those of us, like, we are here, we're not talking about what do we do 2 years from now, what happens 4 years. We're talking about an irresistible future. We're talking about generations' work. And so as we think about with that kind of long arc, what does that look like? How big are there limits to the coalition? Is the bit like, or can we win? Can we have success? And you all get to define that here. Can we win with a really, really large coalition? Whoever wants to take that.
Okay, all right. I think the tent is way too big. It's way too big. We can't be the party of J.D. Scholten and Mark Cuban at the same time. Okay? Like, we can be, but this is what we will live through if we decide that we want to be that way, right? And so, like, I think one of the real outcomes of that, right, is you tell stories that are incomplete, right? One of the things that right-wing populists, not just in this country but around the world, one of the things that they do is that because they aren't tethered to the neoliberal consensus, they're like, yeah, believe your eyes and ears. This stuff is not great. And they also include a story that has very specific villains. And it's kind of confusing to people when you're saying, yeah, there's an affordability crisis, there's a housing crisis, but because you've cozied up with and you don't want to feel uncomfortable the corporate wing of your party, you conveniently don't include a very specific. There are specific villains. There are specific people, specific hedge funds that are buying up single-family homes that need to be named and shamed, right? Like, in order to complete the story, so people can make sense of what's happening. And so I would argue that a tent that is so precious with billionaires are going to be okay. So precious with billionaires that you can't tell the full truth is a tent too large.
Anyone else? Correct. That's fair. So let's keep moving as we continue to chart our path forward. And I'd love, Chris, you've spoken a little bit about the ballot initiative measures. Can you just lay out for folks the successes that we had across the states and what they mean for ballot initiative measures moving forward, how we might be able to use those to harness people power?
Yeah, we won really big through ballot measures, and we have been doing it for a while, y'all. For a while. The same year in 2016 in Arizona that when Donald Trump was being elected, you raised the minimum wage and got paid days. We won paid leave, paid sick leave. We raised the minimum wage in 3 states. We protected reproductive freedom in 7 states. We stopped school vouchers in states like Kentucky and Nebraska. We protected marriage equality. We won so many critical issues, and this is part of our path forward. The people are with us on the issues. We have to talk to them about the issues. Candidates, listen. The Democratic candidates in the Democratic Party didn't say the word abortion till a year and a half ago. So how do you expect, again, to that connecting the dots if we are actually not being strong with our whole chest about the issues that people care about and talking to them about it and listening to their cares and concerns and delivering for them? If we aren't doing that, then how do we ever expect to win? So it's so critically important, and I really do believe there's this great opportunity with the state legislators in this room and the organizers, the people like Mo and myself that lead organizations and are organizing across the country to come together, especially through ballot measures for co-governance, because it's like this opportunity for us to build the future that is irresistible for all of us. And we need champions in state legislatures to make sure that these ballot measures are implemented as the people intended. And we have an opportunity for ballot measures where you may not get to pass something in the state legislature, but maybe we can do it, push a little bit further and go even a little more progressive, right, than you might be able to because of the makeup of your state legislature. So I think there's such a good opportunity for us because of what we've seen for really about 6 election cycles now on what we are able to win at the ballot. And also, we have, because the people are with us, because we are giving them power and agency, because they are changing the material conditions of their lives, there are some state legislators that are not happy with that, right? The people in Arizona rejected 2 ballot measures that would have made it harder for them to have direct democracy. And so you better believe that when some states go back into session, we're already seeing bills pre-filed, that they're going to try to take this tool away from people, raise the threshold like they tried in Ohio last year. We didn't lose in Florida on abortion, 57% to my boy Quinn is winning, and I don't want to live in a world where 57% is not a victory. I see you, Q, right? They're going to raise their threshold. They're going to have single subject requirements. They're going to continue to do this. And so we have to actually be in deep relationship with state legislators and organizing to make sure that we move forward. And I know that is work that you've done, Stephanie, in your state.
Stephanie, do you want to talk more about that work?
The organizing for the ballot measures. And then that's actually where I cut my teeth the first time was in 2017 when the Arizona legislature passed a voucher expansion by 1 vote and the governor signed it into law. We got to work, and that was the first time a nearly all volunteer organization, it was a bunch of moms, got together and said, we're not having it. And we had 90 days to collect 78,000 signatures. And in Arizona, when it hits May, it's hot. And the only way you get those signatures is being out in public. And so the hottest months out of the year, we were out collecting signatures. And we got over 111,000. And that was the first time that had ever happened in Arizona. We withstood the court battles, took it to the voters, and again, 2-1 said we do not want public tax dollars in the private religious homeschools. We want them in the public schools. The legislature found a workaround, but I tell you what, that organization of moms set the bar. This year, with Prop 139, we had over 800,000 signatures to get that measure to the ballot. That's 1 in 5 voters showed up to sign. The people's voices were loud and clear, and that's a lot of doors, a lot of asks. And taking that to the voters, we, almost 2-1, we approved the right to abortion. And I'll piggyback because you've been paying attention. We had 5 ballot measures that would have been constitutional changes. And the voters in Arizona said no to every one of those pretty decidedly. And I think 3 of them dealt with election law. So in Arizona, we have figured out how to use ballot measures, initiatives, referendums to further the will of the people. And mind you, those the referrals were the Republicans work around our governor. We do have a Democratic governor, and in Arizona, you can pass a certain type of bill that skirts the governor's veto stamp. So those 5 constitutional changes that Arizonans said no to, and one of them would have increased mandatory minimums, which was, it was very complicated bill, and it was really truly meant at the end of the day to increase mandatory minimums. And it was interesting for me sitting at my kitchen table, 2 of my children vote and watching them fill out their ballots, and they got to that measure, and I, without any coaching from their mom, it was such a proud mom moment. I thought, oh wow, they're paying attention. They were like, they read it, thought about it, and then they saw mandatory minimums and they were like, oh, hello. So Arizonans, I think, come to expect it. They figured it out, and the groups organizing, listening to the voices of our people, have been able to very effectively mobilize and use the Citizens Initiative to further the will of the people.
Yeah. You know, JD, we talked earlier about this, just the success of what it means for you as a progressive candidate to represent rural Iowa, and I'm wondering, so I'm going to have some stats for you all. So you won your race. You tell me if I'm wrong. But my notes say that you won your race 53 to 46, while your district went for Trump 50 to 48.
Correct.
So tell us, what can we learn from your race about what rural Iowans and perhaps rural America needs to hear and needs to know?
Yeah, so my district is not as rural as what I ran when I ran for Congress. I'll be very clear about that. But the things that, like finding ways to talk to folks is a huge passion of mine, and trying to bring people who either are, especially folks where I live, are not engaged in politics. So my strategy this cycle was really targeting the B's and the S's, the barbers, the baristas, the bartenders, the servers, and the stylists. Because all those people talk to people, you know, and so getting people who already support you, that's easy, you know. Getting people who aren't going to support you or aren't going to vote to be in your camp, that's huge. But there's that other thing that I don't think people talk about a lot, and I learned it when I was running for Congress in a district that had 80,000 more Republicans than Democrats. It's getting somebody who won't vote for you, but they won't talk bad about you. And that's something that, especially being a blueberry in a bowl of tomato soup, we have to do better as a party of getting those folks, because when they're not talking bad behind you, behind your back, that's a win. And it may not be electorally or a lot of different ways, but maybe their friend might vote for you because they're at their coffee shop saying, oh, you know, again, I don't agree with their politics, but they're a good person. So.
Thank you. Thank you. This question is for all of you all, and perhaps, Mo, we haven't heard from you in a minute, so why don't you start with this. One of the post-election narratives that we've heard is that there is this push for a more progressive agenda was the reason that conservatives and extremists swept the White House, the Senate, and the House. So what are your reflections on that assessment, and how does what your experience and what you're seeing on the states counter that?
I have a 2-word assessment. Fuck that. But I have a longer assessment. But if you need it in 2 words, you have it. So if you number one, if you look at who's saying that, they're the people that I referenced, right? They reliably win or loss, but certainly during, and here, wins have like 1,000 parents, losses are often orphaned, right? And you can notice where they plan to orphan the loss by the little breadcrumbs that they lay in New York Times and Washington Post op-eds before the election, right? So this whole narrative about, let's talk about black men, right? And I'm like, okay, this is a country of more than 300 million people, right? Black people are like 12, 13% of the population, right? And also, like, Democrats run up Saddam Hussein type numbers with black people, right? Like, it's obscene. It's obscene that any party could that reliably count on any demographic group, right? To the point where they're like, man, black women are low 90%. We need to bump it up, right? Black men are hovering around 80%. What are we gonna do, right? But that told me that people were attempting to develop a post-election narrative that would orphan the loss at the feet of black men, right? And I also noticed the breadcrumbs leading to progressives and leading to gender ideology. We saw these breadcrumbs, so we shouldn't be surprised and we shouldn't take them seriously, right? But I think what we should take seriously is that we certainly have some vulnerabilities. We should be honest about that. But they aren't vulnerabilities that don't have solutions. Like, I'm looking at people who won despite the vulnerabilities. What are all the mean things that they say about us? Actually, they perennially have said these things. So Republicans, since I've been alive, have consistently called every single Democrat from school board to president, what? Communist, socialist. You know, what are the mean things? We're soft on crime. We're soft on criminal gangs coming from the southern border. Like, I could write their hit pieces better than they can, right? We all can, and that's the problem, actually. So don't worry about what they're gonna do. We know what they're gonna do. The question is, what are we going to do? That is the question. And since we know where these vulnerabilities lie, and we know how they became vulnerabilities, again, this didn't happen overnight. They became vulnerabilities because they had a plan and they worked that plan. Part of their plan is in the air. So you know, right, in your community, when you talk to people about how they're doing, right, they might have a very different answer versus how are things out there, right? Things out there, I feel really afraid. I'm afraid of that, like, that magical criminal gang member in my head. But in my community, I'm connected to my people in my church. I'm connected to the other parents in the PTA. I'm connected to you because you're knocking on my door. And so to me, our job is to build connection. Our job is to organize, and our job is to fight for something rather than reactively, because if we're reacting, then three things will happen. They're going to, look, they're gonna try to hit us over the head around the whopping less than, I don't know, a handful of elite level students who are competing in high school who are transitioning, right? I don't know, there might be like 6 or 5 in a country of like more than 300 million, right? We know they're gonna do that. So instead of whining about the fact that they're going to reliably do what they're gonna do, what are we gonna do? If we don't have an answer to that, we're either gonna go into a crouching position and hope that nobody hits us over the head with that. We will magically become Republicans, you know, like Tom Suozzi, where the brave Tom Suozzi, right after the election, he's like, you know, boys should be competing with boys. Oh, wow, what a brave statement, right? Or we engage in virtue signaling, on, you know, usually online, and say a bunch of things that are just confusing and might actually like not be helpful. When we know with confidence who we are, we take the fight to them. And we're not in a defensive posture. And we take the story to our people. Our people want to fight.
That's right.
So is the right wing going to convince our people that the fight should be at the door of our immigrant brothers and sisters, or at children who are going through one of the most difficult periods of their lives, or the billionaire class, or the real estate lobby, or the pharmaceutical lobby? That's on us. That's not on them. So we should have some real talk about what our duty is in this moment. Our duty is to take the fight to the people that we know are robbing from us.
And I want to follow up because there is this narrative of economic populism or supporting our LGBTQ community, and I think that's total bullshit as well. So when I was running for Congress in 2020, I went on our conservative radio, which is pretty prevalent in my neck of the woods, and they asked me about some they brought just whatever, some trans issue, and I'm like, I'll answer your punch down political question in a second. But the thing that I go, I'm on this radio station, and I go, how much time have you spent on this issue compared to how much have you spent to these multinational corporations that are squeezing our farmers, suppressing our workers, and making all of us pay more for meat at the time? Meanwhile, they had all record profits. I go, how much time have you spent on that? And in Iowa, last session, we had more bills to limit transgender athletes in the state of Iowa than there are transgender athletes in the state of Iowa. And that's the reality of it. And so, again, this national narrative of economic populism, more supporting it's both. You know, I know why I ran for office. It's to stand up to bullies. It's to stand up to corporations. It's to stand up to the Republican politicians who pick on people. And that's, you know, that's my message, I guess.
Two very quick things to build off of what you both said. We also just can't allow the opposition narrative to go unanswered. And I'll name a specific example in New York for Prop 1, the Equal Rights Amendment. When we started to see anti-immigrant and anti-trans messaging, our partners came to us. We did some quick research on research messaging, and we took it head on. We didn't run away from it. We didn't walk away from it. We talked about the people we care about, the people that we love, and we won that ballot measure. So it's so important to not just allow the opposition messaging to go unanswered. And the other piece is, which is connected, sort of the charge that I've given to our staff, our partners, is to make ballot measures love letters to our people, which I think talks to that irresistible future. And to what you were talking about, Maurice, about what is our vision? Where are we going? And so when we have that framework of a love letter, we're telling people that we care about them, that we're going to keep them safe, that we want them to have joy, that we want them to belong. And that, to me, is an irresistible future. And that is our work. We have to talk about the things that we are for, because it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love. Come on, I know people. That's right. That's the proposition we have right now.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to just take a moment to think a lot and just say I've thought a lot about this issue of trans children being under attack in my state and in states across the nation. And Mo, I think you gave a really great analogy of, like, you know, we can either cower in the corner or we can adopt their message that is ultimately harmful to our children. And I happen to be the only out state senator in Georgia. I'm the only queer person that's, you know, steps foot on that place. And so I often am the one who has to respond to these things. And I've just decided to stop playing the game. You know, everything is pitched under this notion of we want to have fairness in girls' sports. We want to have fairness in sports on a K through 12 level. Well, I happen to play sports. I happen to have played and represented our country on the United States national team. I know a lot about fairness in girls' sports. And I know that right now today in Georgia, there are girls who cannot go and practice basketball until 7 p.m. at night because they have to wait till the boys play first.
That's right.
That's about fairness in sports, right? I know children today who may be just as athletic as JD, but they don't ever get an opportunity because their parents can't afford the fees that are required in public schools for them to set foot on a football field or a basketball court, right? So I think for us, as we begin to think, if we're going to talk about fairness in sports, we're going to talk about access to sports, then we've got to look at the real issues of access and what it means that we limit opportunities for children to play because of disabilities. We have incredible federal laws that say we have a responsibility to make sure that children who have disabilities have opportunities for interscholastic play. We have federal laws that say that. How many of your school districts have leagues, actual interscholastic play for children with disabilities? Very few. The state of Georgia has 159 counties. Yes, that's a lot of counties. We have 30 counties that have interscholastic play for children with disabilities. So we want to talk about access, fairness to play, fairness in sports. Those are the things, not the 0.1% of children who might be transitioning, who may be good enough to play on a varsity team. We've got to talk about the kids who actually
Also,
are
your
good
kid is
enough.
not an elite athlete. Stop playing. They're not going to the NBA.
If you're an elite athlete, you already are abnormally or unusually tall and have unusually, that's like what makes you an athlete, right? You're already uniquely gifted in your body type, right? But so these are the things, if we're gonna get out of that crouched position and that like we are afraid of your message, we've gotta stand up tall and say, all right, I'll take your issue of access and fairness, and we're gonna talk about what our people need, our children. And our children are the children who are sidelined because they wanna play, but they can't play because they've gotta go work a minimum wage job in a state where we've refused to raise the minimum wage, so they're working extra hours and can't afford to take off in order to play the sport that their heart loves, right? That's the work we have to do. So I wanna, Rep. Stahl, you've done some, I think, really important work around immigration as a result of you living in Arizona, but also as, I think, a real passion and heart. And you began that work back in 2016 or before. And I'd love to hear you as we kind of pivot, for you to talk about how that landscape has changed in the last almost decade. What's different in the work of organizing and protecting our immigrant community? How have you seen things shift over your work in that area?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let me back up a little bit. So we moved to southern Arizona in 2003, and in Tucson, it is got the rich history of the sanctuary movement, which most people know about, and Southside Presbyterian Church is, my church, St. Mark's, was hand in hand with Southside, but Southside really was the tip of the spear, so to speak, in all of that organizing work. And when we moved there, it was a new landscape for me. I mean, it's not that I hadn't thought about those things, but it was a new lens for me in Arizona. I'm from northeastern Arizona, Navajo tribal lands, very remote. A very different life from my early years to moving to Tucson, which has, just rich, multicultural. And so through the church, we were thrust into this work, this organization, Good Samaritans, that would go out into the desert, into the Sonoran Desert, and place water. Their border links, trainings. Down in Arivaca in the summers, we would have a camp, to help folks wandering through the desert to provide aid. And from that, lots of trips out and with these organizations. But in 2007, it became personal. And I think for those of us who enter into a space that is unknown to us, the things that we connect with personally are the things that cause us to change. And New Year's Eve, around 8 o'clock at night, I received a phone call from a friend. And she said, there's a woman who was detained just south of Phoenix, so incarcerated, sent to a holding place behind bars. And she was from Guatemala, and when she left, she was 9 months pregnant, and it took her a month to get to the United States. She got detained just south of Phoenix, and within 2 days went into labor and gave birth. She had her 48 hours in the hospital. They sent her back. The state took the baby, at which point the consulate from Guatemala got involved, and I received a phone call saying they're going to send her back with her baby to Guatemala, but it's easier to get her out of Tucson than it is Phoenix. She needs a place to stay. Now, mind you, my daughter, at that point, my youngest was 6 months old. My oldest was 6. We lived in an 1,100 square foot home. So I had 3 children running around, and I was like, of course, bring her. We will find a space for her. We will host her. And for 10 days, and of course, I don't speak any Spanish, and Liliana did not speak any English, but for me, what I knew in that moment was that a mama and a baby needed to be together, and they did not need to be incarcerated. In the church, we have rich narratives of people traveling without papers, right? And people fleeing different paths, you know? And for me, it just, in New Year's Eve, we're in the Christmas season talking about a mama and a baby traveling. I spent those 10 days learning about up close the immigration system and the things that drove migration, the things in Liliana's life that I learned through a translator. I just cannot imagine the horrors that woman had to face that brought her to our home. And then having to step through the paperwork in 10 days, a short time, to get her on a plane with her son with a Social Security number. And let me tell you, sitting at that office, that in and of itself is a whole other story. So in 2007, I up close and personal, and my life was irrevocably changed. If you were to go to the state capitol and find my desk on the floor, I have a picture of Liliana and Juan Carlos on my desk, because that is why I do what I do. Because at the end of the day, all of the organizing around immigration is about human beings. It is about people. And it's mostly about people who have been oppressed. And what am I, with all of my privilege, going to do about that?
That's right. Amen.
I could so very easily, in these tough times and with what my district is facing, I have 2,100 square miles. The southern boundary of my district is the international line. And when we talk about the border, I appreciate what you said. It is the southern border that we are talking about. I never hear about our northern border.
No.
And you better believe I always clarify. Now, are we talking about our southern border? And why is it only the southern border that we are talking about? Why are we villainizing people and criminalizing people coming over our southern border? Well, we know why. So we have our organizations that do this work and have continued to do this work. When 2016 happened, many more churches in Tucson got involved. We had, and let me just step back. The further away you get from the border, and it can just be 2 hours north, 2.5 hours north in Phoenix, the narrative, the stories of what is going on at the border changes significantly. I have 2 ports of entry in my district, and I can tell you, I'm down there all the time, people don't lock their doors. This idea that we're not safe, come on now, come on. And what we have is a failure of the federal government to provide management for processing asylum seekers. That is what is going on. And so those are the messages that I continue to say and to call out. We've got members in our chamber whose parents, it's mixed status, right? Whose parents, they grew up in a home with parents who did not have documentation of paper or whatever, right? But they're here, and we've got members, this is personal for them and in their lives. And so our churches have been involved providing hospitality. And when 2016 happened, my church has lots of different series of gates. And we were very intentional and very thoughtful about where we were housing the people who came to us, and made sure that they were in the innermost part of our property behind at least 3 gates. And I can't imagine coming somewhere and having to live in a space, 3 gates, right? I think right now, coupled with what has happened on the national landscape, coupled with what Arizona has faced in the days of SB 1070, we have so many organizations coming together. We are drawing on the wisdom of those leaders who fought so hard to protect our people and to get rid of those laws from the things that happened from SB 1070. We're out very loudly talking about what we need to do and where we need to be. And the most important part of all of those plans is showing up. Showing up, being present, and being present en masse when, and putting ourselves in between law enforcement and the people who need our protection. We can talk a big game, but until we show up, we're there present. That is the biggest piece of what is going to need to change. It's not just the organizations, but it's those of us who say we're in the fight and we talk a good talk. But if we are not showing up for our people, what are we doing? And at every opportunity I have, I continue to put a human face on all of this. We are talking about people. And the key to all of this, and what the Republicans are getting away with, is this dehumanization. And I have to tell you, when we put a human face on it and we remain rooted in our humanity, we are causing them to turn loose of being dehumanized, right? And I think I probably should stop there, but the takeaway is we are organized, we're mobilized, we're calling it out. People went to work. When we saw this was happening, folks went to work, and I serve with an incredible amount of colleagues that this is personal for them. It's personal for them. And they're not shrinking. They're calling it out and they're standing up. And I want to be right there with them.
Thank you for that, Stephanie. And I want to thank you as an ordained person, as an Episcopal priest. Thank you for lifting up the ways in which the church has engaged in being a place of sanctuary for folks. I think far too often the religious right has really captured and really put a stranglehold on who the church can be and what we can be. And so I'm really grateful for you for taking a moment to just say, no, this is the church too.
And to that, let me add, there is something that is going on in my district in as close to the border as you can get. The Republicans have decided that they need to be more diverse. And so what they've done is they are organizing through the evangelical church and are going into the Spanish-speaking evangelical churches and bringing I'm going to censor myself. Bringing up a distorted message. They're wrapping the cross, the symbol of the cross, in an American flag and melding the two. And it is just hard for me because it is white Christian nationalism that they are bringing to these churches saying, we want to be diverse, but that's not what they're doing. It's more akin to colonialism. And it is happening in my district. And so the senator and I who share this space have had big conversations about this and the plans of what we are going to do in order to show up in our district to see what we can do to combat this, because they are gaining ground. They've put out their playbook and they are working it.
And to be clear, this is not just your district. White Christian nationalism is pervasive and is happening in my district, in your district, and in a district near you. It's happening all over. Somebody said go to their prayer breakfast. Yeah. And so I want to thank you again for lifting up our need to be attentive to this issue as well, and for lifting up the ways in which there are churches that are resisting it and playing a role of being sanctuary churches as we find our siblings under attack and at risk. So thank you for that. As we prepare to wrap up, I fundamentally am a person of hope. I know that an irresistible future is ahead and that it is possible when we work together. And so I'd like to end with you all just offering up what gives you all hope in this moment? Where do you find hope and light as we move forward? And what do you need perhaps in order to access that hope? Who can help you get to that place? Chris, why don't you start?
Woke up this morning with my eyes stayed. Ooh. That is 3 a.m.
3
That's
a.m.,
3
3
a.m.
a.m.,
Not
Chris.
4 hours of sleep. Stayed on freedom.
All right.
Yes.
I got there. I am resolute right now. I have so much clarity of purpose. To what you were sharing, Stephanie, 2 days after the election, my mother texted me, am I going to have to start walking around with my U.S. passport? Because I can't pretend to not be Latina. My voice and my body betrays me. And I have so much clarity that I'm going to protect the people that I love. So much clarity. And what gives me hope is the 17-year-old, sometimes annoying right now, brilliant black girl that I am raising, who is truly light embodied, who is joy personified. And many of you have met her. And I think of Zoya, and I think of Sylvia, and I think of Reese, and I think of your child, and I think of all of our kids, and they give me hope, because my other purpose is to build a world worthy of Olivia. She is the most resilient, courageous, brave person that I have ever met, and she deserves everything. Everything. And to never question that she is so brilliant and that she is light. She should never question that. So that gives me hope. So what I need is a nap. But also, that's for real, because I realized when I was doing my annual review and I see 2 of my board members, I did not take a vacation this year. Which I am like, for those who know me, I'm like, talk about rest and taking care of yourself all the time. I did not do that for myself this year. So to be able to remain hopeful, you got to push on me to take some rest and to practice what I preach.
Mo, what gives you hope?
Oh, well, that gave me hope.
Yes.
That gave me hope. And you know what's great about when we all sing together in church? We're always on key. When we sing together,
That's right. That's
so
right.
thank you for that. We got there.
Yeah, we got there.
Well, I could say many things, but I want to go back to 2020. Remember 2020? It was a very strange and unpredictable year, global pandemic, the largest social movement in American history.
Yep, that's right.
There were a lot of things going on. We were sheltering in place, and we all came together, and we defeated Trump and Trumpism. Well, not Trumpism, but definitely Trump electorally. Trumpism came back, but we defeated them on the ballot, right? And what actually gives me hope is, what did the Republicans do when we defeated them? What do they do? They weren't like, man, we need to be introspective. They're like, we won.
They lied.
We won. And so if we could just take like a quarter of their ridiculous audacity, it's a quarter of it. Imagine what we could do. Because there's like this wide open palette, right? There's this open canvas for us because of the fact that at the top of the ticket, there were a lot of victories under that, but at the top of the ticket, the big and smart adults and the consultants and whatever, they lost. We didn't lose. They lost. Our people didn't lose. And all of those people that lost, they're going to be fine. They're going to continue to raise and spend hundreds of millions of dollars on TV ads and digital ads and everything else. And like, the president and his family, they'll be fine, whatever, they'll lick their wounds. We on the ground, right, we have a moral obligation to protect our people and a duty to govern. Yes. And that's what makes me super excited, right? We have a duty to govern. And here's the thing, because all of this, trust me, like there are no smart adults. Mamala's not gonna come save us. Like, no, right? That means that we can rely on each other. And in that gap, in that strategic gap where people are trying to figure out what to do, whatever, that starts on the ground with local elected officials. So you're on the front line of deciding the direction of this country. That is powerful. The people here will decide. Don't wait for the consultants. Don't wait for the 24-hour news people to, like a mama bird to like digest and then send you the talking points. It comes from the folks on the ground and the stories that we tell and the fights that we make. And the thing that I want to say is, in that space, what are we going to do? Are we going to be the protagonists that decide what this next period is, what this realignment is? Are we? If we do that, then I believe that the people in this room and people who should be in this room, we will make what the American democracy is.
I'll be pretty quick here. So there's a Native American activist named Frank Lemaire who passed away, who was near and dear to my heart. And when I decided to run for office, never in a million years thought I would do that. And he gave me the best advice. He goes, JD, if you want change, you have to get uncomfortable. And once you get uncomfortable, you have to get others uncomfortable. So, we're in a room full of people who have been uncomfortable and continue to be uncomfortable. So all I got to say is, if you want to help me create an inclusive economic populist movement, come see me the rest of the day or tomorrow.
Rep Stahl.
I have often said, every chance I get, that hope is not a strategy. Hope is hard-earned. It is the coming together. It is the rolling up the sleeves. It is leaning into those hard spaces and doing the work. And what gives me hope is seeing how many of my colleagues, how many of the people I know who have had a minute and they've rolled their sleeves up, the work continues. And I think for me, I've been focused a little bit on defense and knowing what that means. But in my defense, it's going to be very much going on the offense, because constituent services is going to be what's really important to the people in my district. But I also see others doing the same thing. And so for me, it's the moments when we come together, when we are together and we see one another, when we hold hands, because we have to. We got to hold each other. And then we have to take turns, because we're in this for a really long time. Those are the things that give me hope.
Well, please join me in thanking our panel for this conversation.